Hi there everyone! Welcome to Running a Team, a Module 5 lesson for the subject Work Immersion for ICT Animation. In this topic, we'll be talking about project teamwork, the characteristics of difficult people, and how to work with these difficult people. With that one, let's start off first with project teamwork. So before we start with that one, let's first define what teamwork is. So technically, it is a process of working collaboratively with a group of people in order to achieve a goal. So every single member of that team has to do something for them to be able to achieve that certain goal. That goal being doing the deliverables for the project. So with this one, people will try to cooperate using their individual skills and providing constructive feedback despite any personal conflict between individuals. So the main purpose for this one is for us to be able to finish the deliverables for the project. So with that one, regardless of all of the differences, we will be able to communicate and cooperate with each other, participate in the creation of the deliverables for us to be able to complete them. So with this one, the importance of our teamwork is that first of all, it is a critical factor for project success. And it is also a developing effective project teams is a primary responsibility. So for us to be able to determine the success of our project, for us to be able to meet all of our project constraints, it is necessary for us to have that proper collaboration and communication that is only necessary for teamwork. If you are not able to work with someone properly, be it one reason or another, then that would mean that you are not establishing proper teamwork. Another one is for us to be able to create an environment that facilitates teamwork. In as much as we would like to have teamwork, we need to be able to cultivate an environment that would just encourage that one. So open communication, for us to be able to collaborate properly, open channels, and all of those different things. Also, project managers should continually motivate their team by doing the following. So first of all is by providing challenges and opportunities. When we're creating different projects or different tasks, it's not just about let's say completing the tasks. It's actually also about let's say professional and individual growth. So if you are a good project manager, you would have to look into the needs of your team members as well, aside from delivering those different deliverables. Next one is that providing timely feedback and support. This is especially if the project manager is a bit more experienced and they are handling members of the team that don't necessarily have experience in creating a project or creating a project of that type or of that nature. In the interest of professional and individual growth, we need to be able to give proper feedback and support to our teammates for them to actually work better in the creation of the deliverables. Also, another important part is for the project manager to recognize and reward good performance. So every single one of us, regardless of how old you get, it's always good to have the recognition and rewarding good performance. So this good performance usually is not just about higher pay or higher benefits, but also just simply recognizing that, hey, you did a good job today. The project manager should be able to facilitate teamwork by having these different types of motivation. So aside from the internal motivation that team members get from themselves, an external motivation from their project manager, and also motivation from other team members would really help a lot. How do we develop teamwork? A really important part of this one is to use open and effective communication. Open communication, not necessarily telling them your entire childhood or your entire past, but most likely talking to them comfortably without having any type of filters for the development of the project. So it's not just about, let's say, cussing as much as you'd like, but it's more of saying what you want to say to your teammates for them to have a proper idea of what you want to do with the project. Effective communication is that all of your channels, the way that you communicate, should be available. So it's not just about, let's say, having all of the types of communication through, let's say, face-to-face, online, through phone, and so on and so forth, but also having these channels open and these channels available to everyone. Let's say if you're talking to an older individual, then probably using a video conference might not be an effective type of communication for them. Or maybe let's say you are more of a visual person, then just having a phone call won't necessarily be enough because you would like to see their facial expressions or their body language through face-to-face or through video conferences. Another way for us to develop teamwork is for us to be able to create team building opportunities. So with this one, this is not necessarily something that we can do every single time we create a team. So when you're creating your project and your subjects, you don't necessarily do every single time team building opportunities or team building activities. This is only when the time would warrant it, or most of the time this is usually more applicable if your team is more of the long term, so let's say a year or more. So with that one, it's necessary for us to be able to create team building opportunities. So it can be through the use of, let's say, those team building exercises. It could just be, let's say, establishing proper communication, knowing each other through different ways of establishing rapport. Another way to develop teamwork is to develop trust among team members. Again, this is not the type wherein you're willing to die for your team member, but also divulging information regarding the project in a way that you're comfortable and that in a way that your teammate won't necessarily stab you in the back or something like that. You have their back and they have your back when it comes to creating these projects. Another one is managing conflicts in a constructive manner. So regardless of how tight-knit your teamwork is or how tight-knit, let's say, your team is, even though you consider yourself as family, families still fight. How you deal with that conflict is very essential. Having conflicts all of the time doesn't necessarily mean that you have bad teamwork. The way that you handle conflicts, however, is important. So let's say, even though you fight rarely, but you don't really resolve all of those conflicts, then that would be much worse than, let's say, having a team that has a lot of conflicts but has a proper way on how they would construct it. Another thing when it comes to managing conflicts is that it has to be a learning process for every single one. It's not just about venting out your feelings or venting out this is incorrect, but you have to teach your teammates as well how they can improve themselves and how they can improve the project through the use of constructive criticism. The last part of how to develop teamwork is to encourage collaborative problem solving and decision making. So every single thing that you do, you should do it with the team and for the team. So when you're creating your projects, you need to be able to tell to them what you would like to do. If you have any types of decisions, it's not about, let's say, having someone else do the decision for you, but when you're doing decisions, you have to make sure that you are considering the team that you are in. Here we have the causes of team failure. So these are just a few of them. So first of all is undefined roles in the team. So you're not very clear on who should actually do the software, who should do the survey, who should do, let's say, the design and all of these things. That would cause a lot of confusion and ultimately result to team failure. Bad attitude, not necessarily by the team members. Unclear goals, which is quite similar to undefined roles in a team. Lack of clarity in communication, lack of leadership from the project manager, or sometimes the team members don't necessarily respect the leadership that is facilitated by the team, by the project manager. Clashing personalities, lack of proper training by the team members and also by the project manager. Lack of team goals, so aside from the deliverables, what they would like to achieve as a team. So this is more on the project scope rather than the product scope, and also the fear of failure. So that fear would actually disable the team as a whole. So we have here the characteristic of difficult people. As stated, this is not every single characteristic of a person who is considered as difficult. It's just a way for you to gauge on who these different people are and how we can solve those. So first of all, we have to define first what difficult people or what a difficult person means. So these are the team members, team leaders, clients, or stakeholders who are generally non-cooperative with others. So with this one, it's not just about, let's say, members of your team. If you have a client who is considered as difficult, or let's say even just a stakeholder who is simply affected by the project, may be considered as difficult. Generally, they are considered as non-cooperative, particularly with others, with the project, and everything in between. Difficult people are a concern because the disruptions that they do can usually slow down the progress of the project due to one reason or another. That reason being very significant, even most of the cases are usually insignificant. So most of the time, these difficult people do not get along with other members or stakeholders. These characteristics, as stated, are usually the ones that we see, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every single difficult person would have all of these characteristics. That also doesn't mean that if you have these characteristics, you may not be a difficult person. We have here self-absorbed, entitled, demeaning, demanding, distrustful, approval-seeking. They have lack of empathy. They tend to be compulsive and emotionally detached. Lack of remorse, snobby, addictive, perfectionistic, or sarcastic. For example, if you're emotionally detached, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a difficult person. You're naturally just emotionally detached because you're more of a thinker and not necessarily a feeler, or maybe more of an autistic spectrum generally means that you are emotionally detached. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are difficult with other people. Why are there difficult people in the first place? So these types of people are difficult due to a variety of reasons. So one of the things that can be a reason is that they have personalities or communication styles that can be found as difficult to interact with. This is one of the main reasons why we think of someone as difficult. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're difficult. Just because you don't agree with something that they say or what they do, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the enemy. Typically, let's say when you're working with an ICT team, they tend to be less communicative. So it's more of just setting your role, setting everything in the building a team section. And then after that, communication usually is not quite a lot. So if you're an outsider, like let's say someone within the languages or social sciences, wherein communication is really important, you're not going to be able to adjust with that type of environment. So does that mean you're a difficult person? Not necessarily. It just means that you tend to communicate more than probably your team members. One thing that you have to do is to really bridge the gap with that one. So either they tend to communicate more, or you have to adjust in a way that you don't have to communicate as much as you think you should. Another reason why they can be difficult is that team members, clients, or stakeholders may be seen as challenging without having done anything specific to us. Maybe you just think of, you just see their face and they have that type of face wherein you just hate them, probably. So with that one, they may be difficult for your perception, but in reality, they haven't really done anything bad. With that one, it can be the person itself who is really being difficult. In some cases also, it may be the person who is perceiving it as the person being difficult. You have to assess yourself and then assess the person that you're looking with or you're working with, and then see if they are actually difficult or not. In some cases, they do not have an expertise or an understanding of the specific product or situation. So with this one, this is mostly applicable to teams which are assigned to work with each other. For example, when you're assigned in a team or you don't really have a say on who your team members are, tendency is that you would have this type of person. So this type of person, they can be added there for a number of reasons, but due to their lack of expertise or understanding, they don't really know what's happening. So they tend to be more of a liability rather than an asset. Other people tend to be openly hostile. Why they are hostile? Maybe for different reasons, but typically a person who is hostile is considered as difficult. They can be visibly upset about something. It may not be something related to you. They may just have a resting bee face, but they're not really mad at you. And also, they can be troubled by personal issues. So your team members are human. They have other things that are happening aside from your creation of the project. So with that one, they may be troubled by something else, not necessarily by you, not necessarily by your team members or the project, but it can be something else externally, and they are kind of bringing it within the project. It is recommended for that team member not bringing it towards the project, but you can't really say that. Other reasons why they are difficult, they tend to be probably very quiet or non-communicative, so more than you are actually comfortable with. They can show an attitude of superiority, maybe because they are more, let's say, senior than you. In some cases, they think they know more than you, or they actually know more than you. So that would give them an air of superiority that they can basically run the show, even though that they're not necessarily the project manager or the client. They tend to be impatient, or they can embody the type of person that you have a personal bias against. So probably they look like your ex, then probably that would mean that you don't really like them in the first place. So with this one, how can we work with these different types of difficult people? How do we deal with them, and what are the different strategies? So first of all, why do we deal with difficult people in the first place? Isn't it a bit better than just remove them from the team entirely? The answer is no. Because all of the individuals have their own unique personalities and past experiences, so in some cases, you would find people that you consider as difficult or as challenging, even though they may not be. Even though you have challenging team members, clients, or stakeholders that you may be difficult to interact with, the overall goal is to still do the deliverables, get the project done. If those team members are part of the team, if those stakeholders are part of the team, if those clients or even people affected by the project are still part of the team, we do it for the interest of finishing the project. So that project, in turn, may be able to help different other people. So with that one, for the interest of the team, we need to be able to deal with these difficult people. These are the different strategies that you can do. So first of all, you can identify the nature of difficulty. So you have to first analyze, why do you think this person is difficult? Is it more of what they do? Is it more of your perception? Once you have identified the problem, it is only then that you can have other strategies. Once you have identified, these are the things that you can do. First of all, you can understand them instead of trying to change them. So probably this is more applicable if it's more of an innate personality or more of an innate behavior. If this personality or if this behavior doesn't necessarily hinder everyone else, it just hinders mostly you, then most of the time you can simply understand them. It's more of adjusting yourself. It is also possible that they have different viewpoints than you. So you don't really have to accept their viewpoints, you just have to understand where they're coming from, and then based from that, you can work much more smoothly together than before. Next one is to avoid getting heated. As much as possible, be the bigger person, maintain self-control even if they're being very irrational. As much as possible, we avoid escalation of the problem. If there are different types of conflicts, it is possible for you to talk to that person first, address your issues with that person. If that person is still being difficult or doesn't understand where you're coming from, it is only then that you move on to your project leader, then your immersion advisor, and even sometimes we need to have interventions with the disciplinary office. Next one is that we need to shift from being reactive to proactive. Reactive usually means that if something happens, then you react to it. Proactive means before something happens, you do something regarding to that. So what this does is that once you're doing something before it happens, it usually minimizes misinterpretation and misunderstanding. So let's say if you find someone who is a bit more difficult because you don't like, let's say, how they communicate, or they tend to communicate too little or too much, it's best that you address the problem immediately. Tell them that, hey, I'm more comfortable with communicating too little or communicating more. So with this one, is it okay that you do this or you do that? Most of the time, if you explain your intentions properly, it would focus more on understanding rather than misunderstanding. And with that one, you can focus more on solving the problem rather than, let's say, dwelling on the problem. Next one is that you have to pick your battles. So there are some battles that may be insignificant into the creation of the project and therefore isn't really necessary. You need to avoid those unnecessary problems and complications. Next one is to separate the person from the issue. So most of the time, when we're dealing with projects, there are some viewpoints or there are some issues that we may not be able to see eye to eye with. With this person, most of the time they might be embodying some sort of issue, or they might be talking to some issue that you may not necessarily see. Most of the time you have a problem with their viewpoint or with their issue, not necessarily the person. So it's best for us to identify, this is the person that I'm talking to, and this is the issue that they're talking about. You have to separate those two things so that you're not angry with the person. If you're angry with the person and not with the issue, you tend to be angry with whatever that person is saying. In some cases, that person may just be saying that issue because that's what they think of now. Maybe they're being a devil's advocate. And in some cases, that's not necessarily what they embody with. In some cases, if that person is being really difficult, you've done everything to your power to adjust to them. In some cases, you might not be able to adjust to them. It's also best to apply a spotlight on them. Spotlight being appropriate pressure. In human behavior in your teenage years, having an appropriate amount of pressure would be able to solve that difficult behavior or reduce that difficult behavior. Let's say in real life scenario, if a teacher is applying pressure, like let's say letting them stand up, reprimanding them in front of the class, that would reduce their behavior. Not necessarily because they understand what they did was wrong, but it's more of they want their teammates to stop laughing at them. So if you're able to do an appropriate amount of pressure on your team members, that would be able to reduce any type of difficult behavior. However, I don't really recommend this. It's only recommended if that person is really being difficult. And as much as possible, we use this sporadically, not a lot of the times, only in very rare occasions. The next strategy is that we need to change from a person who tends to follow and someone who tends to lead more. This is more for the project manager, but if you are a team member, it is still possible for you to lead than to follow. So it's kind of related to being more proactive. You can give suggestions to your team member or your project leader on what you want to do, and with that one you can leverage direction and the flow of communication to what you would want to happen. In some cases, they may want to adjust to what you want. And then the last part is to set consequences. So again, this is more if the person is being really difficult and they're not listening to any other thing that you're doing. Setting consequences can give pause to the challenging individual. So if you know that something has a consequence, you tend to not follow it, or you tend not to do it. If you have something of a negative behavior and there's no consequence, tendency is that the person would keep doing it because in their mind they would think that there's nothing gonna happen with me if I just keep doing this. I just keep getting reprimanded or something else. So with this one, you can have varying levels of consequences. One of the examples that we have here is that for your work immersion or when you're doing teamwork, if a person isn't really contributing to anything, we can kick them out or we give them a 0 score. Give them stakes, because these stakes would actually help them get in line. When you're setting consequences as well, it's really important for you not to do it to only just one person. Because if you're putting it only on one person, what happens is that you're antagonizing them. You're making them more feel outside of the group than they should really be. When you're setting consequences, have it for every other person. That includes your project manager and also other team members. So with that one, I hope you're able to understand this lesson. If you have any questions, you may comment below or through the use of our social media accounts. Thank you very much and stay safe.